Hello, Internet! This is going to be a video that's a bit different from most. It's actually going to be more of a vlog, one of those, rather than an actual history video. It comes from a question I was asked a little while ago, and I figured I might actually give a shot at answering it. It was, I'm interested in history and I would like to learn more. Where should I start? To which my reply, of course, had to be, I can't tell you. It all depends on really what your interest is. Start with a good, maybe, history of the world. In Scandinavia, if you can get a hand of Grimberg's Old World History, it's a fairly good place to start, even if it is somewhat outdated. But if there is anyone out there who is interested in history and want to know more, but are sort of daunted at the fact that it is, after all, the history of the world, and quite a lot of things have happened. My advice is probably to start with a person that interests you. Take one of my great personal historical heroes, namely Arthur Wellesley, the Duke of Wellington. Now, Arthur Wellesley was born as the middle son of a Anglo-Irish family in Dublin in 1769. So already there you have a place to start. So why was the Wellesleys, or the Wesleys as they were called at the time, in Ireland when they were basically a, English noble family? What is the history of the English in Ireland? Why has the English and Irish such a antipathy towards each other? What did the English do exactly that pissed the Irish off so much? So there you have a subject that you can then read up upon. Well, then he got a bit older, and because he didn't really have a task, he was eventually, we're still talking Wellesley here, the Duke of Wellington, he was sent to a finishing school in France and gained a lasting sort of memory of, shall we say, the glory, if not, of course, the oppression of the Ancien regime. So there we have that. The history of the French monarchy that ties into that. You can start reading up on that. I know Martius Filius is going to kill me here, but Wikipedia is actually always a pretty good place to start. Don't take what Wikipedia says seriously, but use it as a way to sort of, as a starting point. Okay, this has happened. Okay, well, then I find other sources that goes from there, as such things go. Encyclopedia Britannica or whatever is necessary in order to find it. Moving on with Wellesley's life, he eventually went into the British Army, and another thing. Army historians such as John Fortesque or Oman are always interested in reading. He was then stationed in the British Raj in India, where he made several campaigns against the native Indian rulers, extending British, or at the time the British East Indian Company's hold over central India, and creating basically the British Empire out there. So again, more things to then start studying on. The history of the Maratha Confederacy, the history of the Tipu Sultan, his father Hyder Ali, the decline and fall of the Mughal Empire that basically left the British with an opening to come in, the victories of the great Robert Clive that first established the British as sort of the dominant European power in India on, rather than the French who had also, and the Portuguese who had also been out there, hell, even the Dutch who had been out there. Well, there's something more. Branch into that, read up on that. Following Wellington, he eventually went back and became a member of Parliament in Britain, and eventually married. Well, I'm not going to say read up on his marriage, that's just depressing. They weren't fit for each other. But anyway, there is the history then of British parliamentarianism, which is very, very, very interesting, actually, because to a certain degree, the British people took a larger step towards democracy with British parliamentarianism already from back during the Magna Carta, even, of course, the Magna Carta was primarily the nobility's way of controlling the king. But to a certain degree, there are some steps that sort of, where you can follow from the Magna Carta up to the establishment of a real sort of parliamentarian control over the monarchy and the great nobles that sort of really had arrived already in 1689 after the glorious revolution that I talked about a while ago, and then in stages up until the mid-19th century when it was totally in control and none of the English kings would actually have any chance of interfering. Moving with Wellesley then, I'm sorry. Moving with Wellesley then, he was posted and head of the army in Portugal, fighting the French invaders during the Peninsular War with Napoleonic France. Well, you can't talk about that, of course, without reading up on, well, the Napoleonic Wars and the Wars of Revolution, the French Revolution, the end of the Ancien regime, the various exploits of Napoleon, the various alliances that was formed against France, why Spain was in the position it was, Spain's history, Portugal's history, really interesting, and something that I am sure my friend Carlos will agree with me when I say is severely underrated as a sort of mainstream historical subject. Again, following Wellesley, you then follow his army throughout the Peninsular campaign, and again there are the beginning of partisan warship. There is knowledge about burned earth strategy, or at least, scorched earth strategy that the Russians would of course also use against Napoleon. There is the various battles that happened there, and of course that branches you into military history with tactics and equipment, etc., 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 before then following Wellesley through Waterloo until he entered the British government as first a minister and then a prime minister. Again, then you're sort of, after that he held various other positions in Britain. Again, that's studying British history and how the whole thing comes together. If you want to move a bit earlier, he was in Denmark during the seizure of the Danish fleet and the terror bombardment of Copenhagen during 1807. So, Danish history. That's, again, I'm not going to say much more because I feel like I have sort of made my point around this thing. It's just that if you have an interest in history, the worst thing you can do is, in my opinion, is actually trying to take in too much at the same time. Doesn't mean you can't read up on a lot of things. I'm actually reading a Wellington biography right now by Rory Muir, who is really, really amazingly good. That doesn't stop me from reading up on other history and other stuff at the same time, sort of loosely on the way. But overall, as I guess I have blathered on enough now, so I'll basically say my advice if you want to learn history and want to know how to study history is to find a single smaller subject or person that interests you and just branch out from there. It worked for me. Again, go see, if you're in England, for instance, go see the Tower of London. Find some aspect of the Tower of London. Branch out from there. If you're in Germany, the German Confederation, Bismarck, something. Just branch out, guys. Start simple, and trust me, this is history. No matter how simply you start, there will always be something else you can branch into, and if you take the various branches by themselves, you'll get a lot of knowledge without being overwhelmed. Yeah, that was my first sort of real vlog style video. I don't know if I'll ever return to that. I might be if people have more questions or anything else. But until next time, I have been the Sage, and I wish you all a very happy day.